It's all about the maintenance, baby.
Hello, IT? Have you tried turning it off and on again?
To start, press any key. Where's the any key?
Excuse me, I believe you have my stapler.
Welcome to WII Technologies User Friendly with host Bill Sickens, Technology Architect.
And welcome to this week's episode of User Friendly. We've got a special treat for you this week. We're now an hour. And this is going to let us bring more news and more interesting topics right to the forefront. But we need you to participate in the show. And I do want to thank everybody from last week. We had over 100 emails and other forms of communication, which is absolutely great. In fact, we're going to have some of our guests back in future weeks to answer some of those questions directly. But if you would like to go and participate with us, you can do it by phone, 855-790-TALK, or you can use a modern method of communication. And we have a couple of different things available for there. Submit your emails and requests online. We get them live right here on the set during the show at WIItechnology.com. There's an Ask a Question link on the right-hand side of the screen. Click on that, and it will send it right on through. Twitter, follow us at OneUserFriendly. Post your comments there. We got them also live on set. Facebook, like us at UserFriendly. Just punch in the name, and it'll bring it right up. We are on the YouTube WII Technology channel, and one new method that we're going to be trying out today is text messaging. Now, if you would like to send us a text, please make sure you're somewhere safe before you do it. Do not attempt to do this while you're driving. Go ahead and pull over and then text away, and that number is 775-557-5120. So I'd like to welcome both of my co-hosts again today. Gary, are you with us?
I am with you.
Well, that sounds good. That'll be a first. And Gretchen, good morning.
Hello.
All right, let's go ahead and get started with our news.
All right. The E3 Expo is being held June 10th through 12th in Los Angeles, California. E3 is reported to be the world premier trade show for computer and video games and related products. E3 draws tens of thousands of professionals to experience the future of interactive entertainment. The most influential people leading the most innovative companies in the industry will attend E3 to see groundbreaking new technologies and never-before-seen products for computers, video game consoles, handheld systems, mobile and social, and the internet.
So a big part of what we do over the course of the year to stay current on things is to go to the different conventions that are out there. E3, which is actually Vegas, is a event that is held every year to actually go through, and it's become the kind of the Comic-Con of the video game market. And in fact, later today on our show, we're going to have a computer gaming expert that's going to come on and talk to us a little bit more about this. But there's a lot of news and a lot of information that's out there, and it's going to be very interesting to see what's new for the new year, especially with all of the new consoles out. So, Gary, on video gaming, I know you have a Wii stuck, hidden away there in your house, and what do you think of the whole thing?
We do have one. I don't play a lot of video games. It's just never been my thing. Actually, the only thing I really play on my Wii is Tiger Woods Golf, which I've gotten quite good at. In fact, I wish my regular golf game was as good. But it's a great form of entertainment, especially in wintertime. The whole video game thing. And the thing, as an outsider looking in, I find it very, very difficult to keep up with everything that's going on, in the video game world. Sorry, my phone just rang.
Well, hey, there's a lot of interest in gaming. I can tell you, it's out there. No, that's really, and I've seen you play the golf game, and some of these new things that are coming out. And some of the new systems we're seeing are really just kind of taking it to the next level. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show in some more detail and go from there.
Michael S. Malone, author of a new emotion-stirring book called The Intel Trinity, is about the founders of the computer chip maker Intel. It details the personalities and perseverance of Robert Noyce, Gordon Moore, and Andy Grove, who launched Intel in 1968. The book explores the unique, complex relationship between three particular scientists and engineers and how their relationship led to the inventions of the silicon circuits and the microprocessor. The book will be available in print and digital format on July 15th.
So while, of course, I can't officially confirm or deny anything of this, it is possible. There's been some pre-releases of this book that have been out there. to people that have worked for Intel, and something that we've had a pleasure of doing in the past and do on and on, managing different things and different aspects. Intel is an example of a great American success story. And I recommend this book to anybody that's interested in these type of things. Dr. Moore, for any of our techies that listen to the show that may be familiar with Moore's Law, which is the idea that the processing power of a computer will double basically every 2 years on an exponential growth, has been something that was laid down in the 60s and has become kind of the standard for where the IT industry is today on their development. So all the history of these things from the founders, it's a way to be able to kind of see where we've come from and where our roots are. So again, I recommend it July 15th in bookstores, both hard copy and electronic.
You know, these are people who radically changed the world. You know, just absolutely. And this was what, 67, 68?
68.
And here they are 40 years later. They have just radically transformed the world. I'm just in awe of the vision it took to get us to where we are now.
Well, you know, Intel is actually called by a number of people, experts in the industry, if not the most important, one of the most important companies we've had, certainly when it comes to computers.
Could Las Vegas be the next Silicon Valley? CEO Jeff Brown of Cobalt Data Center thinks so. He states that Las Vegas has low risk of natural disaster, inexpensive real estate available, and access to good labor. Currently, he's trying to encourage other tech companies to look at what good opportunities may be available in Las Vegas.
Well, the short answer to that is yes, our headquarters are there. Actually, it's very interesting to see what's going on in the Nevada marketplace. Las Vegas has a lot to offer. We've been privileged enough to have an office right on the Strip by the convention center, and being able to kind of see what's going on in the area there and the idea of where tech is coming from and the fact that there's data centers and a number of other resources that have appeared in the Las Vegas market in the last few years is really something to see. Gary, what do you think? Next Silicon Valley?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of silicon and sand, isn't there? And there's a lot of desert around. So what does Las Vegas have to support that kind of industry? I mean,
you know, the big thing, and like the topic talks about, is you don't have the problems with things like earthquakes and a lot of the natural disasters. It is hot and dry, but as long as you have your data center and your equipment set up for such a thing, it actually can work a lot better. I know that we had an issue when the earthquake hit in Los Angeles a few months ago, that data center was affected by that fact. Now, we were still online, of course, because we've got stuff everywhere, but the point being is if this is a situation you can avoid, it might make it a very good place to look at if you're an IT company and want somewhere that you're not going to have to deal with things like natural disasters.
And plus, doesn't Nevada have just an excellent tax structure for businesses coming into the state, too?
Yeah. And that's a big part of it. And that isn't just Las Vegas. Everywhere in Nevada, it's the ability to grow and the ability to have your business and do it in such a way that the taxes are low and the market's good for business. So, yeah, I think it's a lot of different things that we're going to see what happens over the coming few years. But the idea of growth in the industry here certainly is out there.
News of another data breach, this time at American Express, is prompting calls for cardholders to protect themselves. Earlier this week, American Express announced that it was notifying over 50,000 California residents that data including their names and account numbers may have been breached. According to the notice, the company was informed by law enforcement that several large files containing the personal information was posted online by apparent members of Anonymous, the online hacktivist network. The company believes the subgroup Anonymous Ukraine was specifically to blame. In this case, cardholders are encouraged to check their recent transactions, place fraud alerts on their accounts, and check their credit reports.
So only 50,000 this week. I'm not sure that data hacks are news anymore. I mean, it's been the year of just for Target kind of being the biggest one to start this, but my goodness, eBay's been out there, and I believe Michael's and then several other stores, and it's getting to a point now where this seems to be old news. Gary, have you had any problems with your personal information getting out?
Actually, no, but I'm not in California.
True.
And I really haven't had that problem, but my stepson has, and I know various people and friends and family who have had their. My son Andy was affected by the Target hack. So, what can I mean? Isn't there something that I could do? Let's say if I have a massive computer, I'm a target or something like that. My computer or that my system can recognize that it's being hacked and send some kind of a spam back or some kind of fire a salvo back that actually cripples the people trying to hack you.
Okay.
You know, isn't that a defense that could be developed?
It's an interesting idea. So, in other words, we arm the server in a way.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. I mean, you slap me, I'll slap you back.
I think from a standpoint of anybody that's been hacked, they'd love that idea.
So why do we do that? Is there a law against it?
Well, as far as a law against it, there are regulations having to do with booby trapping and that type of thing. So it'd be interesting to, talk to someone that's an expert in the field and find out what our rights are actually really to protect ourselves in that way. I do know that from a standpoint of security, it is something that these businesses, they really need to take it seriously, because what's been going on here in a lot of the cases is just been simply internally, there are certain things that should have been done that weren't done that allowed for these type of things to happen. American Express specifically, I don't know, the information's still coming out on that one, but I do know in both the cases of eBay and Target, it was a matter of the hackers and the bad guys being able to get around the private security that had been set up and that type of thing through systems that really, really shouldn't have been.
Just smartphones and tablets anymore. The world's tech giants are now battling over a wider array of connected devices, from refrigerators to cars to wristwatches. Announcements in recent days from Apple and Samsung made clear they are staking their claim to the Internet of Things, following Google's announcement earlier this year that it was creating a new Android platform for wearable electronics.
So in our last, go ahead.
When are they going to plant this in my head? When am I going to get and we're kind of coming up on break here, but I mean, eventually, don't they put this stuff right into my brain? I don't even have to have a device.
Well, there's been certainly discussion of that, and I think that we do have a long ways before we're going to see implanted technology, but we certainly are seeing the wearables and these type of things, and it is definitely out there. All right, so after the break, we'll come back with the rest of our news, and then a little later on the show, our guest. This is User Friendly. And welcome back to User Friendly, 855-790-TALK, online at wearetechnology.com. Send us your questions, send us your comments, and we'll get them right here on air. And Gretchen, if you want to continue with the news.
Alrighty. Billions of people lack internet access globally, and Google has shaken up the market for fast internet service in parts of the United States by offering or planning fiber to home in Kansas City and 11 other cities. Its reported entry into the satellite internet business could do the same globally by providing increased competition and better service than existing satellite technologies. The effect of competition could be powerful. Google's entry into municipal fiber markets has tended to drive down and improve service offerings from existing ISPs, according to some analysis. What do you think?
Google Satellite. It's going to be interesting to see where this actually ends up going. I know when the television industry started having a satellite delivery system that was viable, it really did change the market because it added competition, which is something I think we really need here. And right now, it seems like that in most bigger cities, we have 2, maybe 3 providers of high-speed internet, and usually that's something like the phone company, which would have started in DSL and might do some kind of a fiber offering now. You usually have your cable company involved in this, and with the consolidation in the cable industry, I think our choices are going to continue to be reduced there. So to have a third option that is really viable and is standard is going to be very interesting. And I'm somebody that was a user many years ago of satellite-based internet, and it was certainly faster than, at that time, dial-up connection, which would have been the alternative, but the lag and the equipment and some of the weird stuff that we had to deal with to make it work was very interesting. And this is something that, according to all the information that's coming out from Google on this product, is going to go away. The lag that will be there, they're going to be much lower in orbit, and that type of a thing, so that we'll actually be able to use offerings like online gaming and VoIP and that type of stuff, and have it be something that will actually work, not just in rural areas, but in markets where we have other options for high-speed internet. As far as the fiber-to-door situation, which I think you said was in 11 cities now,
Yeah.
is something that if you're lucky enough to have that type of a connection, really is worth trying out, and it is another unusual option. I don't know if Google's goal is to get into the internet service market from that standpoint beyond really testing things out, but if it's there, it's cool. And Gary, I know you have high-speed data, and I think you were using your local cable company. Has that been perfect?
No, it has not. This whole satellite thing is very interesting, because remember when they launched Obamacare, and I mean when they actually used the sign up, when you had to start signing up, one of the problems the government had was actually reaching, because the whole launch was all done online. And the government had a lot of trouble reaching the people they really needed to reach, because a lot of those people didn't have the internet or an internet connection in their homes. So you wonder how something like this would impact people who don't have access. They can't afford to buy cable, or they can't afford to buy the internet in their home, so they can just pick it up out of the air. It's a very interesting idea.
It's not something that I've seen an actual statement on yet, but somehow I do think that this probably won't be free, but it certainly will have the potential of driving the prices down. And like you say, in the rural markets, using the launch of Obamacare as an example, which, as we all know, has been very problematic for a lot of reasons. One of them was the idea of access, being able to get on and even being able to get in there and be a part of things. And I think that is something that may have brought a little bit more into the forefront, but certainly is the idea, if you're in a rural area and a good portion of the population is, 2/3 I believe it is of the planet, are still not online because they don't have access. It's going to be very interesting to see how this really can affect and improve things in both the rural and the city markets.
A year after revelations first emerged about mass internet surveillance, more email providers are adopting encryption, a simple change that could make it harder for spy agencies to vacuum up huge numbers of communications in transit. Establishing a secure communication channel requires both email providers to exchange encryption keys beforehand. Even if an email provider tries to encrypt messages by default, messages will be sent in the clear to providers that do not support encryption. Gmail has more than 425 million accounts worldwide and was an early adopter of email encryption. On June 3rd, Google released draft source code of a tool called End-to-End that would secure a message from the moment it leaves one browser to, wow, that really rise to another, meaning that email providers couldn't read them as they travel between two people, because they wouldn't have the keys needed to decrypt those messages.
So we seem to be having a day of a lot of tones and ringing, and I wonder, that spy agency, could that be the NSA?
Maybe.
Email encryption is not anything brand new. It's been out there, the idea of being able to send messages in transit that are protected against and guarded and that type of thing, but it isn't something that has been commonly available to just the normal email user. And I think the events of the last year and a half have certainly brought that out to the forefront and made it very much something that we need to be aware of and look at. The idea of email encryption, the ability to be able to take your email and send it to the person that's supposed to receive it and not have it be able to be read, or at least read as easily while it's in transit over the internet, is an idea that seems to very much be taking hold. And the example that you had there before all the tones and spaceships landed was this idea that end-to-end on Google, it's now going to be part of their system. It's now going to be part of just automatically what's out there and what's offered. And I think that we're going to see an adoption of a standard in all of this to be able to send an email and have some kind of an idea, or be reasonably sure that it goes to who you want it to go to and it doesn't end up on someone else's desk. So we'll see how this is developed. The encryption systems that are out there do tend to work pretty well. I think that a guarantee that it couldn't be intercepted is something that one would never want to offer. But hey, at the end of the day, it's going to be better to have it.
HIPAA violations can easily cost healthcare professionals $50K in fines, so sharing your iPhone photos with others is one thing, but sharing medical information via the new HealthKit framework for iOS 8 is completely other thing. In some cases, iOS developers working with HealthKit to transfer medical and fitness data to and from Apple's companion health app may find themselves having to cope with a strict privacy, data protection, and security breach mandates of the Federal Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, also known as HIPAA. One question still unanswered is what role, if any, Apple and the iTunes App Store might have with regard to publishing apps that would fall under HIPAA coverage.
HIPAA is an interesting thing. It's been a law that's been on the books since the late 90s. And last fall, updates to the requirements came out under the name High-Tech Act or HIPAA 2.0. Something that we as a company has been working with for about 7 years now, I think, is going in and dealing with HIPAA certifications. So what is HIPAA and what does it mean really? And what this is related to is kind of two sides of a coin. One is for medical providers. And you have very good doctors and medical practitioners that are out there practicing medicine, but they're not computer experts. And this has become something that's kind of really been a sore point because you'll have your doctors doing their job and doing it correctly, but not following exactly to the letter of the HIPAA rules and ending up with something that potentially could create thousands, tens of thousands, now even hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines or more, just simply from ignorance. And that's, as with anything else, not a defense to not following these rules. The latest thing that come out in the news on this is the idea of HIPAA and accessing your medically protected data and protected files, or doctors doing that, let's say at the coffee shop on their way into work for that day. Download a password-protected PDF file or something of that nature, but they're doing it over the network at the coffee shop. This is now considered to be a HIPAA violation. So it's very, very important that we look at and deal with this in the right way. The Apple Developers Conference was last week. In fact, our own Devin was on commenting about it. And one of the things is this idea of HealthKit and what they're doing. Is Apple going to be playing a role in the HIPAA environment? And if so, are the apps going to be certified, and how will that work? And this is all stuff that we will need to find out.
All righty. What is Tizen OS? Tizen OS is an operating system that has been in development for years by Samsung. And just last February at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, the company announced two Tizen-powered products, Samsung Gear 2 and Gear 2 Neo. Samsung also has launched the world's first Tizen OS smartphone in Russia, the Samsung Z. Up until now, they have been using Google Android's OS to run its range of Galaxy smartphones and tablets. However, the Korean manufacturer has confirmed its intent to go it alone, offering an alternative to Google's mobile OS, Apple's iOS, and the Windows Phone platform.
So, a new player in the smartphone market, Tizen OS. This is an interesting topic, and actually there are a number of these that have been trying to break in. It's just looking like with Samsung and partnership with Intel behind this might have a shot at actually doing that. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. HP tried to do their WebOS a couple of years ago, and probably nobody out there has a WebOS phone at this point. It didn't work too well. And there's a couple of driving factors behind this that make it either viable or not viable. One of the big things is apps. This is a problem that Microsoft has been having with Windows Mobile. That entire environment has been something that to launch and to get from point A to point B, well, I can download your software, I can enjoy your phone, but if I can't play my Angry Birds, I'm going to go to a system I can, which has been primarily Google and Apple to this point. A couple of things about this operating system that are going to either make it or break it. One thing is that it is open source, and the only other one that's in the mainstream right now is Google's Android. So will mobile handsets adopt this? Samsung's betting on it, and we'll see it in the first product. When are we going to see it in the United States? I think that it's going to be at least a year down the road. Well, when we get back from the break, we're going to be joined by Bill Snodgrass. He's going to have some comments on the E3 show, and we're going to talk a little bit about video gaming. WeAreTechnology.com. Send us your questions. We'll be right back.
PC load letter.
Welcome back to User Friendly. So we've got a number of questions that have come in, and we're going to actually pick up a couple of these at the end of the show. But one I did want to pick up on before we start our interview with our guest is, what is open source? And that's actually a very good question to define some of the topics we're talking about. Basically, there's two different ways that software is distributed. Commercial software, what you would go to a big box store or order online and pay a dollar amount for, that's commercially produced software. But a good portion of the industry, probably the majority of it, is actually done through a system called open source. And that is basically defined as you have a number of programmers out there that work on a project together. The software is usually available to the end user either free or at a very discounted price. And the development and support of it is done by the user community. So that's the difference between the two. The reason why handset manufacturers like Android in this way is the only open source product is they can go in and completely customize. They don't have to put out a lot of money to use it, and it's supported generally by a lot more people. All right, so our guest this afternoon is Bill Snodgrass. And Bill, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Bill.
And how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine this fine morning.
Well, that sounds good. Morning, afternoon, you know, it's just they say, oh, cocktail hour somewhere, right? So there we are. So I know you're with us a little bit since our topics today are revolving around the E3 conference. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've done in gaming.
Well, I kind of came a little late in the game, being born in 1985, so I kind of missed the Atari generation and all that, you know. I didn't have to suffer that E.T. game, I guess. But I've been gaming since, you know, Nintendo and Sega and Super Nintendo, on all, you know, most of the platforms I could. You know, I missed some of those of that 1990s console wars with the 3DO and the Jaguar. I programmed a couple of games, you know, way back on early computers, and, you know, nothing with any graphical interface like we got nowadays. Other than that, I've been a computer tech, and I have a bachelor's in anthropology, and one of my focuses is art, and, of course, video games is a heck of a medium for art.
So the anthropology degree, is that for the Atari?
I think there was a game for that, but
yeah, probably. In fact, and I don't know if you heard, but they found E.T. And what I mean by that, for anybody that's you know, with spaceships in the first half, no, we are not a conspiracy theory show. However, there was a dig done at a dump. I believe it was in New Mexico a few weeks ago, sponsored partly by Microsoft for doing a documentary. And what had happened was they had produced more copies of this E.T. game for the Atari than there were Atari consoles at the time. And this was about 1983, 1984. And with the failure of the game, had decided that they were going to literally bury it. And they did. And there's been kind of this almost urban legend idea that's revolved around it. And they went in and actually did dig it up. So, you know, from that, moving to our current things and stuff that's happening in the gaming industry, and boy, has a lot changed since the days of Atari. Tell us a little bit about the E3 conference, what it is, and what they're trying to do.
Well, when it originally started in the first years, it was more or less an industry conference. A lot of the big game developers, software engineers, that kind of stuff would get together and, you know, just show what they were coming up with and, you know, who was better. Nowadays, it's kind of like you said. It's like Comic-Con mixed together with video games. Just one big party in Vegas, and everybody's trying to show everybody up. But it is amazing to watch, even on TV, and to see in person. It's pretty awesome.
It sounds like something that might be, you know, certainly worth showing up at if one can. And I know that I was reading about this in preparation for this week and getting everything out there. And the thing of it is it looks like the show actually runs Tuesday and Wednesday. But they have a bunch of stuff going on with something called pre-press conferences that would have happened on Monday. What have you found out about this? What is being talked about? I mean, you know, what are we looking at for what's going to be new this year?
Well, as a matter of fact, I did research, and I came across, you know, what they call the day one recaps. And I see that Microsoft, of course, is coming out heavy, trying to sell their franchise Halo. Trying to bring out a new Tomb Raider and, you know, continuing a lot of these old franchises that they have. You have the game developer company EA, or as some people remember them, Electronic Arts, and they're finally bringing out Star Wars Battlefield 3. Now, for a lot of people, that is really good news because the Star Wars Battlefield series was pretty good. I mean, it was just open combat, lots of people. You know, I remember spending hours and hours on end with friends just playing that game, running around as Darth Vader.
Oh boy, that sounds great. Now, Electronic Arts, I know, has been a little bit in conversation lately. In fact, it was named, I think, one of the top 10 most hated countries in companies in America. And you know, it's interesting to see them coming out with this. I know they had a very bad launch of the new version of SimCity last year. Do you think that they're going to do better?
I would hope, but their track record has really declined. I remember reading an article in the late 90s about how EA was actually one of the best game companies to work for. They were offering, like, paid sabbaticals and had all this great landscaping and mazes, and just apparently were a really great company to go work for. But EA's business practices as far as how they're handling games and licensings for games has kind of caused a point of contention amongst gamers, because you buy a video game, let's say used, they're big franchise games like Dead Space, and to get to play with other people, if you don't buy the game new, you had to go buy a new license from them, which could be anywhere from $5 to $20. So there's a lot of this issue, and reading their end-user license agreements really leaves you skeptical about their business practices and how they want to treat you as the customer. I would like to think that, you know, a company like that could definitely come ahead in the future. Really, they've always had good quality games for the most part, but it's really going to be up to their marketing and how they want to start handling their end product to us, the users.
It's interesting to see kind of where this is headed, because I, like you say, there's several big franchises, and Electronic Arts was around in the Atari days, so they have this huge long track record. And my latest addiction, which is a mobile game for The Simpsons, thank you to my production staff for that, has been, you know, interesting to see. And I have to say that they've done, for the most part, a pretty good job on the game itself. But connecting to the servers can be problematic. Trying to log on can be problematic, and the support of different platforms can be problematic. So hopefully we'll see them kind of get through that and come up with some things to fix that, because I know the franchises themselves are great.
Oh, yeah. But the server problems have been a plaguing problem for the last couple of years with their games, even on consoles, online, all of that.
So this year, I know we've been seeing a lot of these new consoles coming out, the next generation kind of across the board. Of course, the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, and I think Nintendo's still making something out there. What are you seeing as the direction of these guys?
Well, I'll start out with Nintendo. You know, the old big player in the game. They've definitely held their own for as long. With Nintendo, I believe that their console game, you know, the Nintendo Wii, I think they're kind of pushing that towards a backstage for a little bit. I mean, they're still going to produce games for it. It's definitely got some potential, that handheld screen. I mean, there's very well some ways for some great party games to come out, you know, family fun, just the way Nintendo has always really tried for the last decade. But I've noticed their movement towards, you know, continuing with their Game Boy series, you know, the Nintendo 3DS, the 2DS they just came out with. So I believe that their handheld mobile gaming is definitely the direction that they're going to be pushing forward.
Now, the systems like the handheld, can I play a better game on that than I can on my mobile phone?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so there is a difference between the two.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
The 2DS, for example, while its current format is a little bulky, in my opinion, from their previous designs, it's designed for gaming. You know, it has the controls for gaming. It has the screens designed to handle that kind of resolution and such, usually higher resolution. It has a touch screen separate from visual screen, so you get two screens to do information on, and so it's very much more than our phones and tablets these days.
So, and Nintendo, as far as the console end of it, I know with the original Wii, they led the idea into motion gaming, and the tablet version now with the Wii-U, which I've heard mixed kind of responses on, and people either seem to love it or hate it, but it is definitely part of what they're doing. And this is something, though, that is very different from the other two players in the industry, which is the Microsoft Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. What's going on with their systems? I understand that there's been a lot of new releases and these type of things, and the consoles themselves are very new. What's your feeling on those?
Well, I believe the PS4 is definitely at the forefront. They have marketed it very well. They have looked at what the customer wants. I mean, now they have a paid subscription service for their online set, but I believe they also still have a free service. But it is a very nominal, very small fee in comparison to the past for, say, Microsoft's Xbox Live. Sony has always been very good at marketing, very good at handling things. I believe, if everybody recalls, their system got hacked a year or two ago. They ended up giving people who they even thought might have had a problem just tons of free software and games for their system. So on top of that, they have a very strong system. It's got serious power behind it. And Sony has always created a console that it takes a few years for the developers to really figure out how to push it. So what we're looking at now that's come out on PS4 isn't even where PS4 is going to be retired.
Well, that's going to be very interesting. And Bill, these sessions go by very, very quickly. I want to thank you for being on the show today. And when we come back, Gary and I are going to discuss kind of the basics of all the topics. Thank you. So, Gretchen, I understand we have a couple of questions.
Yeah, they're both from our Twitter account, and the first one is from Sir Knight Galahad, and he wants to know what is your favorite old school video game?
Well, Sir Knight Galahad, my goodness, that is an old question. My favorite old school video game, well, I was raised in the first generation Nintendo era. I did have an Atari and a model that probably not a lot of people remember, but the fan and all of that. But I think my favorite franchise would have probably been The Legend of Zelda or Super Mario Brothers, which were two very, very big ones back in the day, and a lot of time was spent on those, and I did complete all of them, which I think was a 40-hour investment or something, and that was obviously more important than homework or whatever else I was doing at the time. So that's certainly where I got my start. So I would have to say probably Zelda or Super Mario Brothers.
All right.
Pong.
Super Pong?
No, just Pong.
Just Pong.
Just Pong, okay.
I mean, I'm really a dinosaur back there. That was kind of a fun. Then there was a gunfighter. Where you do like the old West gunfight, where you stand and face each other in the street and shoot each other. There was that one. Those are the two I remember.
I still have my blip.
Wow.
Well, these days, and Gary, we do have color now on the video game, so it's actually kind of cool where they've gone with that. And I actually do in my collection have a Pong. One of the very first home-based versions, and it has the two little dials on it that you use, and the thing still does work.
Those were fun.
Do you want the next one?
Absolutely.
Okay. This one's from Las Vegas Resilience, and the question is why is the speed of internet so much faster in other countries, and is there any way to get this speed?
Boy, is that a loaded question.
Really?
We have to take a couple of things into consideration. One of the big things here that we were talking about earlier is the idea that most major markets only have two internet service providers. And it's an interesting question right now because it's actually the basis for a fight that's been going on between Verizon and Netflix. There we are. And Netflix, of course, has been dealing with the net neutrality issues and has started paying the providers for the last point of connection. And apparently there has been some kind of a disagreement between them and the Verizon provider in the markets they're in that has actually gone to a point that when the Netflix video was started, they were putting up messages to call Verizon and, quote, complain about their lousy service, end quote, which certainly wasn't liked by Verizon. So the idea of speed has certainly been something that is a contentious issue. One of the other things we do have to remember is that the United States is a much larger geographical country than many other places in the world. So while if you're in a country in the EU laying cable or doing some kind of a transmission system would be a lot easier and a lot cheaper just because it's closer together, we're much farther apart. So as far as speed and all of that kind of thing, a big part of it is just simply competition to get the providers to upgrade their connections. But there also are definitely some issues that relate to just distances and these type of things. And again, Gary, I know you've got cable up there and you said it wasn't perfect. What's your feeling on your speed?
Well, how about number of users? Does number of users impact the speed of anything?
Well, it certainly does, and it depends a little bit on the type of connection that you're getting. So like in the evening, if you log on and the speed's slower, this is created by a situation where there's a lot more people on the network, and there is a certain capacity which the provider has, which doesn't always cover what their subscribers want. So I'm in a condo complex. We have a lot of people that are on the same system, and you do about 5:30. It's almost like their system needs a cup of coffee or something. And what's actually going on there is there's a finite amount of bandwidth that's provided, and it's being divided up along a much more applications. In fact, 30% of the internet usage in the evening now is services like Netflix and Hulu, people watching videos, and we're definitely starting to see an impact that that's creating.
And those are huge files, aren't they? So they take up a lot of space.
But they take the bandwidth, and the bandwidth is something that I think the best description that I've ever heard of this is the idea of a freeway, and the freeway has a certain number of lanes in capacity. So if you have a couple of cars on the freeway, they can drive very quickly. But if you start bringing in a lot of traffic, it will slow way down. And that type of a situation is very, very good to use as an analogy for your data networks. The less people are on, the more information can travel quickly. And then, yes, you add to it the idea that a high-definition movie sent to you contains a lot of information, is a very large amount of data that needs to be transferred. And yes, you definitely start seeing a problem with that slowing down because of the size of the files.
And here's the other thing. What's fast anyway? Like my provider recently called me and wanted to know if I wanted to update my speed. So and I don't know what the speeds are, but I said okay, I'll try this new speed. And so I download something. It's 1 second faster with the new speed that I have. Whoopee! It's like, what's 1 second, Bill?
And how much more per month is that 1 second costing you? You know, that's a big part of the equation.
I mean, but we want. How much faster than instant do we want things?
Well, and it's, it is a subjective question a little bit. If I drive a BMW or drive something else, what's fast to me? I can hit 150 miles an hour easily. Now, of course, I'm forbidden from doing that, and I would never do that. But I might have a different kind of car that's capable of 60, 70 miles per hour. And again, the user, or in this case the driver, is going to determine what to them is fast. Now, from your case, like you say, there's a difference of 1 second. We have the same thing here. There's all kinds of different connections and speeds, and we have servers and on, that what you want to do is you need to sit down and look at what you're actually doing and what the need actually is. For example, a server that hosts websites that is basically text-based content, some media, but primarily not movies like you would have on Netflix, isn't going to need the same capacity or high-speed connection that you would for a media broadcast server, which would do the movies. And then on your end, okay, so you've saved a second on downloading the file. Is that a big deal to you? And if the answer is no, then why would you pay for it?
And again, what's a second? I mean, and look, I mean, there are a lot of businesses probably listening to this, and I'd be curious what businesses, and they're like an insurance company or a bank or something. They're constantly doing large files and transferring information from one person to another. Do they struggle with not only hackers, but the speed that it gets there?
Well, for example, we have a client, real-world example here, that produces blueprints. And these tend to be very large files at the end of the day. The mapping information and all the different things that go along with that. And they need to be able to transfer that between different locations. And if they save a minute on each file, that actually turns into real money. There's a return on investment in the connection. Their employees in their 2 different offices can get to things faster and be able to do things better. So from that standpoint, yes, they pay for and get whatever the maximum is that's available to their locations. In fact, their offices are based on an idea of where they could get high-speed internet access, and they would turn down a cheaper rent because of what's available at the locations they're at now. So from that kind of a standpoint, it is a very big deal. Now, other businesses that may not be as focused or as necessary to these high-speed connections, all of a sudden it becomes a very different set of circumstances. And I know one of the things you work with is a insurance testing provider, and most of their stuff is online. Do they consider their speed of internet connection to be important?
Yes, they do.
You know, so again, it's subjective, and it really comes down to what is the business, what are they doing, and what are their needs. So, you know, I think we're going to see faster speeds certainly as competition grows. That'll be one of the areas that the different companies compete on. One other thing I will bring up, which is very interesting, that kind of goes along with this, is the idea of the LTE networks on our cell phones. And I was actually in a conference the other day listening to and delivering part of a keynote that had to do with, has LTE been a waste? And it's a very interesting concept because from one standpoint, it is a very good high-speed mobile connection that in some cases could replace terrestrial internet and that type of thing. But then all of our service providers immediately came out and capped how much data we could transfer. So the question then becomes from that, well, we've got high speed, but we're not allowed to use it. In fact, these policies actually encourage us to use Wi-Fi and other forms of internet whenever possible. So, you know, again, I think the answer to these things is very subjective. It's what you're doing, it's what network you're on, and kind of where you're going from there. And, you know, it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. So, Gary, in our last minute and a half here, and boy, even an hour went by quickly today. What do you think of the headlines? I mean, we've been talking about gaming and the different conferences and these type of things. What do you see happening in the future, do you think, with this? Did I blow you away there with that question?
I think he's gone.
I think he's gone, my goodness. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on, and maybe we can get Gary back here a little bit in our last minute, talk about some of the bottom line of all this kind of stuff. PlayStation 4 is on the top of the game for the first time in 8 years. It's interesting to see where that's going, distant third place. And Microsoft is backpedaling a little bit, but their system is in a close second to Sony's. I think a big part of this has been to deal with marketing and the launch of the market and various different things. When Microsoft was talked about last year, we had a situation where, like we were talking about earlier with our expert, which has been happening with EA, that they were going to charge for the use of used video games and not allow people to resell, and that really was not.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It was a big deal, Gretchen, if you think back to where that was. And they actually made the change to their format at the E3 conference last year so that they could announce that the used video games wouldn't have that problem. So it'll be interesting to see where we go. Well, listen, thank you everybody for joining us this week, and we will see you next week where our topic will be graphic design. This is User Friendly.